All right, we're live.
Thank you. This is the November 4th, 2020 meeting of the Shaping the Avenue Committee of the East Lansing Planning Commission. I see all three members of the committee are in attendance, and we have an agenda in front of us. Any changes to the agenda, either members or staff?
None with staff.
Okay. Well, then let's proceed with item 2, building use standards. That's the very end of the document under item 3.2, or close to the end of the document being reviewed under 3.2. Chris, did I see a hand just now?
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't bring this up, but I was wondering, are we supposed to make our statements about the fact that we're attending electronically from a certain location, as we're supposed to do for the...
Even though we're not a body that is taking action, I think we should, just to stay in practice, maybe. Thank you, Chris.
Might as well. I'll go first. Daniel Bowman is present remotely and is in East Lansing, Michigan.
Chris Wolf attending the meeting electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
And Cynthia Williams also attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chris. Again, we'll move on to building form standards. Searching for a page number right now.
55.
The form standards, it's the use. There we go. Page 66 of 154, or 55 of just the document itself, depending on what you're looking at. Absolutely. We've seen this before. We've gone over it repeatedly. Were there any changes, Ms. Schmidt?
One of the changes that I did make that I wanted to call to your attention was the fact that I actually put special use permits apply with the open squares. Before we had just additional regulations, and that covered, I thought, really what when we went through it, we were really looking at them as being special use permit required. And then the special additional regulations are also called out under the last category. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that is really all that I did. I am adding one change under medical marijuana. We need special use permits allowed under provisioning center. And then to the right, I've placed a note stating that it is part of an overlay and where to find it in the regular code.
Sure.
And then another thing that I noticed that needed to be changed is on page 57, the adult marijuana was not added into those yet, so that needs to be added in. And I think that is it. That is really the only changes.
Say adult recreational marijuana?
Right, or all of them.
Okay.
We only have the medical marijuana called out, so we have to put adult recreation into all of the categories.
But you already added them, right?
I have not. I have in the chart, but not in the page 57.
The page 57 that I'm looking at has them in it.
The medical.
It has
Medical,
both.
but not the regular, the adult.
No, it has both. No, it has both. I don't know how we have two different page 57s, but
I don't either.
okay, it's number 16 on that page, correct?
Oh, that's what we're looking at.
And the first two say
Oh,
medical.
I see. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, the next two just say marijuana, which means that it doesn't say recreational or adult, but I believe that's what it's referring to. And then it continues throughout. For every one that says medical marijuana, there's a matching one without the word medical.
Except for transporter then. Oh,
No,
it's got transporter too.
yes.
Thank you. I didn't realize I had added those in, so you're right.
However, as long as we're looking at that one, well, It's missing processors.
Very good.
Of both kinds, of course.
Okay.
I've got one additional, I'm presuming it's a typo. In the table on page 56, assisted living / memory care / independent living refers to a section 804.2. I presume that there's another, maybe, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, maybe just either strike it, or maybe that was actually meant to be 804B2 or 804C2 or something like that.
I'm sorry, where is this now? 804B?
So I go back to the chart on page 56 or 67.
Yes.
And then it's near, it's the one that's sort of all by itself that has any comments under additional regulations.
I see.
It says 804.2 and there is no 804.2. There's 804A2 or, again, maybe it's,
I'll take a look
maybe
at
it's just
that.
exactly, whether it's just strike it or find the subsection that it belongs to.
I think it was supposed to be A2 and I just thought I missed it. And I just typoed it.
Yeah, and in which case it's stricken, right? So, all right. Any other comments on the tables or the text that follows the tables? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have several. I don't know if I can present these well enough. Let me start with one that's relatively simple. My comments have, very few of them are specific to the uses. They're more overall bigger sort of issues. The first one, I question why we have section 803 in here at all. It duplicates the table, or it comes close, and actually there are differences in it, which is part of the reason I question why we have them both, because it creates a document where we have to update things in two places at once. But I don't see that it adds anything at all to what's in the table. If 803 was providing more text or examples or something to explain what those uses are, then that might be helpful. But it's nearly a duplicate of what's in the table.
I would agree.
I agree also.
So we would just keep what's in the table and
Don't you think?
803.
Table and eliminate 803.
Yeah.
Good idea.
I have a question. D under 803. Civic use, when you go back to the definition of that and civic buildings, weren't we going to go through at some point and identify certain structures we thought were so historically or otherwise significant to exclude them from the regulating plan? Was that still something that we were going to do?
Probably should. I don't know that we have very many, but we should look through and determine that whether we have any or not.
Yeah, I still had that as sort of a hanging issue that we were returned to.
And it's called out in the one section that we are doing that, so.
Yep.
Trying to decide what to do next year. I guess let's go back to the beginning on page 54. I have trouble following this because of its discussion of categories and uses. And those terms don't seem to be used consistently. Just looking at the very beginning, it starts out, it says uses are grouped into broad categories. Now, if you look at the table, it says in the top left, use category. The first column has residential, commerce, accessory, and civic, which I think could be called broad categories. The second column is what I would call uses. They do not seem to be broad categories at all to me. And I guess I'm asking for opinions on that, because then when I read through page 54 and it talks about categories and it talks about uses, it seems to kind of mix them up in a way that it's a little hard to figure out, for example, under use determination, just exactly what the planning and zoning, or the director is supposed to be doing.
So if we basically just move the title category over above residential, commerce, accessory, and civic, and just centered use on the second column, would that help?
That would definitely help if we agree that that's what we want to call those. But then the text under 801 needs to change in multiple places. And I did not try to rewrite it.
We can do that and forward it to you to take a look at.
Okay. All right, maybe we can leave that one at that for now. And another issue has to do with the interaction between this table and our definitions. So, for example, if you go to page 66, look at the definitions for use. If we start with the first one in the definitions, which is use, comma, civic. Is everyone there? Or?
There.
You can see for the purpose of this district, civic uses include, and it gives a list of almost 10 or so different uses. My first comment is then when you look at table 802 under civic, there's only one of those uses there. So we have acknowledged in the definitions that there are other civic uses, but we're not permitting them anywhere apparently. Then if you go through those uses, I see a number of sort of conflicts there. The very first one under civic uses, it includes meeting halls. Well, that sounds very, very similar to places of assembly that we have under commerce, I believe it is. Right, in our table. We don't have it under civic uses. We have post offices, retail operations only, no primary distribution facilities. To me, that would fall under retail sales and personal service in the table. So it seems to me as though we're calling that a civic use in one place and we're calling it commerce in another. There's museums are included in there, but don't appear anywhere in our use table. I've got additional concerns if we go on to use commerce and use residential that are sort of interrelated to what I've already said.
you want Dave and I to take a stab at that between adjusting the table and the definition a little bit?
Yeah, I guess so. Let me go on to the definition of use commerce. Skip right to the end of it, I guess, first, which says, the first 4 lines tell all the things it includes, and then it says, and all of the civic uses defined above. So from the definitions, all civic uses are commerce. And yet, in the table, we are separating those. That seems a little inconsistent to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what the solution is.
I think it needs to be reworded. I don't think we want to include, I don't know, Dave and I'll have to take a look at it and kind of sort through it.
All right. Another thing that struck me about use commerce is the way it starts out. For the purpose of these form districts, commerce uses shall be considered to encompass all of the uses permitted in B1 through B5.
Yeah, that's not, that
And
needs to be changed.
right, if we're going to define that way here, and yet in our use chapter 802 or 800, whatever, section 8 table, we have a different list. That seems like a contradiction to me. We should decide. I think we probably want to define the uses in that table, not by reference to our existing B districts.
I agree.
And then under use residential, again, we are referring to our current code, but we do it using a different style of language than we did under use commerce. And again, I'm not sure what we want to do there. I didn't go on to look at the residential. Well, I guess for residential, we only have 3 uses. We have 1 or 2 family, multiple family class A, multiple family class B. Well, again, it seems that we don't need that definition to say what it says, where it refers to our existing code.
Agreed.
All right. And a very minor thing that is sort of related to that, if you look at the table on page 55, in the bottom row, the very, very last row that has the boxes in it and so forth, towards the right, it has a parenthetical that says see part 9 definitions. And it's not at all clear what that's referring to or why it's down there at the end of the table. We used to have that in an earlier version of the table. It appeared under the civic uses in the next to the last row. But now it's kind of floating off by itself, and I'm not sure what it's supposed to tell us.
We'll take a look at that.
one more small thing that's related to having two lists of uses. On page 57, the commerce use number 8 is retail sale of alcohol. And as far as I can see, oh no, it is there. I'm sorry, it's just in a different spot. Oh no, it is there. All right, I couldn't find that in the use table 802, but now I see it is there. All right. Another reason not to have two lists. Another use that I think is missing, we don't have a reference to adult foster homes anywhere that I could see. And it doesn't seem to be covered under the existing categories. And I sort of remember that as being a type of housing that Joseph Sullivan told us is acknowledged explicitly in state law, which means it's probably one we should cover. So, some of these others we've made our own names for them because they're not covered in state law. But.
Right.
And right at the moment, I don't have suggestions about where those should be allowed, or what they're most similar to. They're sort of in between the foster family homes, foster group homes. I mean, maybe it falls under that.
I think it does fall under that.
Maybe that's what that category was supposed to be for, but it didn't. I recall Joseph saying that the state calls them adult foster homes, but I guess we need to check on that. All right, I think that's it for my comments for now. Oh, no, I see one more here. This is a question. Under accessory uses, what is a private garage? I couldn't quite envision what that's referring to.
It means on a house, not a public garage where people park for a fee.
Okay. So that means, so it would be a place designed to store vehicles, right? Is that
right?
More or less? So it's not sometimes the term garage would be used as a place to work on vehicles. All right, so I guess my follow-up question is, that would seem to mean that a business in any of the M districts, or a building, let's say, would not be allowed to have a place where they stored vehicles, because in the table, we don't permit private garages. So if they were someone who used vehicles in their work, they would not be able to have an indoor space to put them.
I don't know how we handle our current code, because we don't call out specifically garages. For instance, motorsports, they store cars inside the building. So I'll take a look at that and see if we can come up with something that kind of addresses that.
It's certainly not a common use for businesses to do that.
But it's an ancillary use or expected use.
All right, I think that's all of them.
Right. Good job. That'll bring us oops, there we go, onto item 3, the memo regarding shaping the avenue. It's, that starts on page 2 of 154, and it's an 8-page document. Sorry, I'm going to adjust this and make it a little bit bigger because I had some questions or comments on this. Anybody else? Okay. Just out of curiosity, Darcy, do you intend to distribute the October 2018 draft? And I only ask because you made a number of comments regarding it. I'm not sure that it's necessary. It's one of those where I read this, I saw that, maybe if I had it with me, I might cross-reference, but quite frankly, I took your word for, the fact that the changes that have occurred were, basically you referred back to the draft, but I didn't feel it necessary for me to go back and verify what you had done. I have every faith that you did that accurately.
That's up to you. I think originally I had thought that people would want to have the two, but I don't necessarily think that people are going to actually go through and compare both documents at this point. I think they're going to look at it on its face value, but I also don't know. So I'm hoping that you can weigh in on that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Why don't we just do page by page? I can see I've got a couple of other comments a little bit later. Any thoughts on that? Does anybody want to see the original version of this when we're looking at the new updated?
No, I noticed those references in here, and to some extent, I question how much they help. I think in a way, it's more meaningful to us on the committee. I have a feeling that the rest of the commission is not going to remember the October 2018 draft really at all, and I don't think they are going to be interested in going back and comparing it. They want to see what the proposed draft is, and
I think if I'm remembering correctly, though, at our last commission meeting, I think you might have said you were going to provide it. So can anybody else recall that? I don't have strong feelings about it, but.
I mean, I guess I probably won't refer back to it, but I'm wondering if it's just another attachment to an email, you're not printing it. And if anybody is inclined to look back, have at it. Particularly if, because what Cindy had said, if it was even possibly indicated that, that it might be provided. I presume you have a copy of it and all the edits that we've made throughout.
Well, actually, as long as we brought that up, I did refer to it while I was going through the uses. And one thing I didn't mention, I'll just go back to that subject for a brief comment. In that document, under commerce in the table, there were only 13 lines, let's say. And now we are up to about double that. And my point on that is that when it was originally written, it was somewhat more correct to say that those were use categories. They were much broader. And through our evolution, talking about the uses, we divided them down much more specifically because we thought that's what we need for East Lansing. So anyway, it's an example of why I did go back and look at the October 2018 draft. Probably won't apply to what most of the commission is doing.
So what would be your preference? That I take out all of the references to the...
I think it actually makes for, again, I didn't go back and verify, but to me, it's sort of as a record of what was done over time. I think it serves that. I really do think that, it's well written, right? That good summary. But I think that to go back through and remove all that stuff probably isn't worth the effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think So I don't think that's worth your time.
All right, great.
And I agree with the comment that it's good to have it as a sort of record of what kinds of things were done.
Great.
I mean, if nothing else, it'll show how much thinner it is now than when we started. Just, the table got bigger, but overall, I mean, we did
Right.
a lot. And I think maybe that's not a terrible thing to make known.
I think inevitably, as we get into some of these kind of more thorny conversations, it'll come up what the original document said versus what it is. Somebody's going to want to see it and refer back to it. And so we may as well just have it there.
All right.
And it'll be a clean copy. It won't be a marked up copy.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, then on to, if there's nothing else on page 1, then comments or concerns on page 2. All right, on to page 3 then? I've got a couple of, these are just grammatical or maybe typos or whatever. Anyway, on page 3, item 202, plan review.
Yes.
Maybe about halfway down. I'm going to read it out loud because I think I read it yesterday and it sounded wrong to me. But let me see. The sentence starting with thereby requiring less time to act on an application by eliminating additional review and action by the city council that is currently required in most applications. That's a fragment. I think it maybe was at one point joined to the previous sentence by a
Thank you.
comma. And then the last sentence, therefore having the ability to receive additional funding opportunities that would otherwise be available is also a fragment. I don't know how to, it's simple enough to change, presumably.
We'll take care of that.
First person or whatever. And then the very last under 301, you've just repeated, again, just sort of presumably in editing, it lays out specific street and block configurations is repeated in the next sentence.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh, I've got one more, sorry. The next paragraph, the regulations for street components or possibly standards, sort of to use the language of the text, it just double the component. I think that's all I have on that page. Any others? Chris? No, go ahead.
I wonder if, going back just to the beginning of part 3,
Mhm.
when I started reading the very first paragraph, my immediate reaction was, why isn't this telling us that the regulating plan is essentially the zoning map? So I continued reading on through there, and then when I get under purpose and intent, then it does say it is like a zoning map. But I say that because when this was first presented to us, I had a lot of trouble for a while understanding the term regulating plan. It's such a new term. So I just wonder if you would consider putting that explanation, just right near the top of that section rather than moving it down under purpose and intent. Something about the equivalency with the zoning map.
That makes sense.
In particular, because part 3 is called regulating plan.
Got it.
Anything else on page 3? All right, then how about page 4?
I think in the first line of 401 purpose, it's just a typo. Purpose of the building form standards is to create a vital and coherent public realm that frames the streets hyphen pace.
Thank you.
I missed that.
Hyphen went in the wrong space.
Yep.
In the sentence just after that, a similar one, well, at the beginning of the fourth line, the word envelop is there.
Oh, yeah.
Should be envelope.
Oh.
It refers to it's supposed to say the building envelope, so it should have an E on the end.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
A spelling checker would never catch that.
No.
Or street.
Spelled properly, but
I've got a more general question, and I don't really have a strong feeling about this one way or the other. Just sort of thinking out loud. And this is throughout. But for instance, under 302, the second or the third sentence, starting with required building line location and new street alignments and so on, would it be inappropriate to? It probably would require a fair amount of effort. Either capitalize that because it refers to something specific in this code, or even use those small case caps. Again, maybe really, really picky, but it's just one of those things where required building line. We're reading this, and anybody reading it would presumably know that what that is. I'm just curious if it's something that anybody else feels like it should be called out specifically.
where are you?
I'm just, for instance, in the first paragraph.
No, but first paragraph of what? I'm lost.
Sorry. Yeah, the first paragraph 302.
Okay.
Yep, and then this is just a for instance. It happens throughout because we refer to building form standards throughout, or required building line. But let me see it. So minor modifications to an adopted regulating plan. Again, that's sort of a term that's specific to this code. But it's the third sentence that starts with required building line. Again, it's got a very specific use in what we're doing here. Again, it's really more just would it make it unclearer, or would it be worth the effort to go back through in the places where there are terms that we refer to in the definitions to actually use that small case capital that we've seen throughout? It's just a question. It's not a direction. I mean, the danger is that you're not going to catch them all, and then it's going to be even more. I mean, no offense, but there's a lot of places where potentially that there's a definition that's sort of embedded here, and we're just not referring to it that way. Again, it was just as I read it. I'm not seeing that either anybody's all that concerned about it, so maybe that it's just me.
Yeah, I think if I see some value in doing that, but I think you'd then have to go through this whole memo and do many others.
Yes.
I think there'd be a lot.
Yes. Okay. I'll just, I had it for myself as a question to raise.
And I think everyone who reads this would pretty immediately, I hope, recognize it as a technically defined term. They're not going to know what it is immediately when they see it, but I think they'll realize it's talking about a specific requirement. And so putting it in all caps doesn't do a whole lot more than that.
All right. Again, just a question. Any other issues on page 4?
The document I'm looking at is not paged. For some reason, it opened it in it opened it in my browser because it recognizes. I think it's a Word document, maybe.
It is.
And okay, so I'm not sure where we are exactly, but
We're just going
5 of 154. Does that help?
I do have a comment on part 4.
Oh, okay, there you go. That'll work too.
The building form standards.
Mhm.
Are we ready to move on to that one?
Yep.
this is a little hard to explain. I tend to think of part 4 as the part that is most equivalent to our current zoning standards. In a strict sense, that's probably not true, but it certainly governs things like the setbacks and so forth. And I wondered if there would be some way to put a statement in there that helps convey that. But I can't think, you can see even right now, I'm having trouble explaining how I see it. You know, it starts out, includes the purpose for the building form standards, the general standards, specific frontage, height, placement, and element standards for mixed use and residential use. And that's correct. And especially that latter part, specific frontage, height, placement, and element standards for mixed use and residential use. That's kind of capturing what I'm saying, but maybe not in quite the language I would prefer. I don't know, does anybody understand what I'm trying to get at?
Are you suggesting that this is the meat of the ordinance, right? This is where most people are going to go to look to find out what this is all about.
I guess. No, I know. I mean, certainly the street space standards, they should be looking at it. The architectural standards are going to draw some attention. So maybe it's just that I'm looking at it in too much of a traditional zoning sense when I say that this is the meat of it. Now that I talk it out, maybe it really doesn't need it.
Okay, whoops, sorry about that. Anything else on, well, in section part 4, how about if we do it that way?
Okay.
At least the first page of part 4. Okay, so then let's turn the page, and there's part 4 is continued here. Welcome back, David. All right, moving on past part 4 to, whoops, just a sec. I'm on to part 5 then. Sorry, one of my notes doesn't necessarily apply. Or at least the first page of part 5. Not seeing any concerns there, so turn the page. Second part of part 5, which starts with 502 Street. Okay, part 6, architectural standards. I've got just a typo on 601. This subsection establishes parameters regarding. All right, next page, which starts with, actually it starts with the end of 603. The first full paragraph on this page is 604, roofs and parapets. Chris, you look like you're scowling, like you wanted to say something. Okay, if I'm moving too fast, say so. Part 7, parking and loading. Thanks.
Just concentrating.
Good. I like that. And then the last page, starting with part 8, building use standards.
No, I have nothing more.
I've just got maybe a clarification or a question. Let me scroll back here. Under 801, this subsection explains how the uses are grouped and explains that performance standards may apply to some uses and so on. We refer to them, if it's what I'm thinking of, we refer to them as additional regulations at the table. But I'll sort of pass this on to Chris, because it might very well be that remember when we were talking about incentives and bonuses and that they had similar but not the same meeting. And I'm just wondering if indeed this is actually performance standards is the right term here because it covers a larger topic or issue.
I think we should probably use additional regulations because some of them are probably more performance standards and some are just additional regulations.
And again, I just locked onto it because that was the term used in the table.
I think that would be much better there.
It's actually the heading of part 804 in the document. I don't know if you looked at that.
Oh, it sure is.
It is development and performance standards. So,
but I think if we just put additional regulations, that covers both.
That suits me. Yeah.
so I lost where you, so you're talking about in the memo where it says 804.
Yes.
So it would still say development and performance standards to start with.
Mhm.
And then the sentence that follows would change a bit.
I was actually looking up at general provisions 801.
Okay, that's what, yeah, that's what I was trying to clear up because it mentioned it
Yep.
there.
Are we good there then? And move on to part 9?
Yep.
Okay. Just again, sort of maybe picking away a little bit, but I actually, this is on 802. Should it be use tables or is use table fine? It's a minor issue, but there are effectively 2 tables, are there not?
Yep.
Okay.
On the memo, item 802, we refer to a use table.
Okay, I see.
We actually do the same thing on I'm looking back now, I just caught this in the body of the actual ordinance, page 66 of 154 or page 55 of the October 27th draft. All right, that's item 9 then. And that's the last item on the memo. All right, not seeing any hands. We can always come back if something's troubling you. Shall we move on to the item 3.2, Shaping the Avenue, October 27th, 2020 draft? I'm just went back through it again, but did you have anything in particular that you wanted to touch on here, or as long as we're at it, the draft markup? Or is it inappropriate for me to sort of lump those two together?
No, you can lump those.
Yeah, did you have specific issues that you wanted to raise? I mean, basically, just we're looking at it. The cleanest draft is the October 27th, 2020. Yep.
I did have a couple things that I came across that I wanted to run by you on page 9 of the new draft, October 27th draft. 9 in the document. I'm not sure. Part 3, regulating plan.
Yep.
The last sentence under 301A talks about modifications to the regulating plan will require rezoning except as provided for in 302A. I would recommend that sentence be moved down to 302, amending the regulating plan.
That's a good suggestion.
Yep.
Then on page 19, we switched the heights for a 4-story to 80 for M3, but I didn't switch it for M2, and that should probably be 80 feet as well for a 4-story. And that's on page 19.
that extremely high for a 4-story building? That's
Yeah.
20.
However, what we did was to get the 80 feet. Okay, that's for 6 stories, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, never mind. But it would 50 be sufficient for 4 stories, or do we need to go up on that, like 60?
Those are pretty much equivalent. They differ by, I don't know, less than a foot per story. 6 stories, 80 feet is 12 2/3 feet per story or something like that. And 50 for 4 is 12.5 feet per story.
So just keep it 50 then?
I think 12 per story is adequate.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. We'll keep it then.
So that leaves, sorry, it seems like these still aren't quite right. So M4 and M3 each has 2 different maximum building heights. The smaller one, is that supposed to refer to the base height limit? So for M4, we have 6 stories and 100 feet.
Yes.
Now that's extremely tall for 6 stories.
What we did was talked about the 6-story building at 90 feet, 8 inches, and using the 10-foot increment in the chart, and we back down. So if you're going to go 10 feet bonus, that would be 40 feet. So at 6 stories, you'd be 100 feet. So we're trying to, I thought you had suggested we get to that and back down to the 6-story, which was 90 feet, 8 inches for the MSU Federal Credit Union.
Okay, so you rounded that up to 100.
Only because the maximum height right now is 140 in areas.
I see.
And bonuses are only 10 feet. So we took that and backed it down.
Okay. So then when we go to M3, now you're suggesting, are you going to change one of those?
We did.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We took the 100 bonus because that would be 6 feet. And we took that from the M4, that the 6 feet is 100 feet. And then we backed down two 10-story increments to get to 4 feet, and that's 80.
Oh, I see. All right. That they seem, the base heights seem too tall, but I guess I don't see any harm in it because it's really unlikely that anyone's going to build a 4-story building that's 100 feet tall anyway. So, although, you know, that does raise.
It would be a 6-story building at 100 feet tall.
No, it would be a 4. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. What I meant was a 4-story building that's 80 feet tall.
Right.
That's what would be unlikely.
Yeah. No, you're right.
But this does raise another question, and that is, I'm sure I asked this sometime in the last year and a half that we've been doing this, but when we refer to stories here, is this are we using the same definition of stories that we use in our current code?
I think that was the intention.
So if they put in parking levels, those would not be considered stories.
Right.
Okay, so that could be a reason that we would grant more height than would be needed for just 4 levels of occupied space.
Right.
So in that sense, somebody could relatively easily do a 6-story building, 100 feet, that includes a couple, you know, most people would look at it and say, well, that's a 7-story or an 8-story because it would have parking levels. All right.
You good there?
Yep.
Yeah, it looked odd to me too, but then trying to get to our 1 story for 10 feet, it wasn't making sense. On page 27, I just corrected it. It says zoning administrator in a couple spaces, and I changed it to planning and zoning administrator.
David? There it is. Let me turn my phone off, sorry.
So the story height definition, I just looked up the definition in both of the form-based code draft and then our zoning code, and they are different. The form-based code, it says the story space between a building or within a building above grade that is situated between 1 floor level and the floor level next above, or if there's no floor above the ceiling or roof above. And then in our zoning code, it talks about something similar, but it also includes an exception that says story height shall not apply to multi-level parking garages or to parking levels within multi-use structures. Such structures shall comply with the building height limit as stated in feet for the district which is located. So that might be our intent to include that, but right now it's not in the definition.
We need to add that.
If we want it to be the intent, then I think it should be in there in the definition, so it's clear. Does that seem reasonable?
Yep.
Because otherwise we're operating on an assumption that that's our intent.
Right. Good call.
And we know how that goes.
Okay. And then on page 41, for the properties listed in the historic district, the Secretary of Interior language under 601C, that would probably fit better under general principles under 602. Instead of purpose and intent.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all I had.
Great. Any other, I'll say edits or concerns?
No, unfortunately, I was only able to find enough time to skim through this, so I
Me
don't have
too.
any comments.
And we'll have plenty of time to make additional corrections going through the planning commission. I think we got a good amount of them taken care of. So additional ones we can catch through the other processes.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well.
Sound good?
And then same, was the draft markup, but I think you provided that for our use. Any comments on that? Item 3.3 on our agenda.
Nope.
And item 4, the timeline. Questions or concerns? Looks good.
All right, we will get these corrections made, and I would like to get this stuff out to the Planning Commission sooner than later so they can start taking the time to read through it. And we will, Rebecca's back, so we will get her scheduling the work session in December, early December.
Right.
So, okay.
Commissioner Wolf, Chris?
Yeah, question. Do you know what business we have for our regular meeting in November? Do we have much, or?
I think the only thing we have on our agenda is ordinance 1492.
I was just thinking about, were you thinking you might get this material out to the commission even before that meeting, or?
Probably not.
Okay.
Soon, close to it. Not in time for them to have much done as far as reviewing it by the 18th.
Yeah. So you're thinking of probably the last week in November they would get it then, or?
Yes, at least. Like I said, they might even get it by the 18th or a little bit before that, but they won't get it far enough ahead of the meeting on the 18th to get a lot of review done.
Okay.
Right, then we'll see it on the, oh goodness, the first week in December and in a work session.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see that there's anybody from the public participating.
Actually, one more question on the timeline.
Yes, absolutely.
I can't remember. Has the commission been told? We had this at our last meeting, is that right?
Yes.
But we haven't actually tried to schedule that work session officially the first week. So we don't know yet how many members can meet
Right.
that
And we'll
time.
make sure to change it if we don't have enough. It was kind of a,
Okay, thanks.
Again, I didn't see that anybody else except Mr. Parcell is participating anonymously, and so there is no need for public, or there's need perhaps for public input, but there will be no public input at this point. So that brings us to the end of our agenda, and there are no objections. We are done with our business, and I'll call us adjourned at 11:05.
nice seeing you all, and thank you for all your assistance here.
Appreciate it.
Wow, this is the end of a lot of work.
It's the beginning of the end.
It seems
Yeah.
that not like sort of put a stake in the ground or something.
No,
Maybe the end of, let's say, phase 2.
I was going to say, yeah, you have plenty of work to do.
The first phase
Sure,
was with the consultants, and the committee is the second phase. And
Still
All right.
nice to put a bow on it.
I know.
Absolutely. Good work.
Yes.
Right. If we're adjourned, I will end the stream then. So everybody have a great day, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
See you all.
Bye.
bye.
Soon.